Hello everyone, I am on the Star Wars The Old Republic public test server and I'm going to be showing off the new ability trees for the Assassin Sith Inquisitor. If you want to be able to test these out yourself, all subscribers have access to the public test server, and I have a separate video on my YouTube channel about how to install the public test server. And I have some links below about the information about the Sith Inquisitor being on the test server, as well as where you can go provide feedback. I have also covered the Sith Inquisitor Sorcerer in a separate video. It got really long, so I switched over to making an assassin video. So this character has been boosted up to level 80 on the public test server, and she will be pressing K for combat and open up the new ability tree. As you can notice by this big WIP symbol in pink that stands for work in progress, both this UI, the icon, and the actual abilities are a work in progress as it's on the test server. Nothing is finalized yet. You can easily switch between darkness, deception, and hatred. So for this video, I don't play the assassin very much. I really like the assassin tank on the live server, but I pretty much not played the deception and hatred specs at all. So basically I'm going to be going through the trees, but I won't be able to give you a lot of feedback, though there is some interesting choices at level 70 that differ, especially for the tank. So we're going to be starting with deception, and at level 1, just like before, you get your surging charge. And at level 10, you pick up Recklessness and you pick up Reaping Strike. Now, what gets interesting is that at level 15, you get an actual choice to make related to Reaping Strike. So the first option is Penetrating Slash. Increases the armor penetration and critical hit chance of Reaping Strike by 20%. The second option is called Reaper. Killing an enemy within 3 seconds of dealing damage with Reaping Strike resets the cooldown of all damaging abilities and increases your critical hit chance by 40% for 6 seconds. And your final option is going to be called Energized Blade. Critically hitting with force attacks resets the cooldown of Reaping Strike. Reaping Strike costs 10 additional force. So those are the 3 abilities you get to choose from that will affect your Reaping Strike. And this is kind of a pattern that all of the classes are going to have, especially in this new update, is you'll get to be able to choose between 3 abilities that affect a key ability, and we'll get another one later up the line as well. So at level 20, you've got another choice to make, which is interesting. So the first option is to get Overload, and Overload is your it's your push. So apparently you don't have your push, your overload by default, and it's something you have to choose at level 20. So the options that you're giving up, and if you choose overload, are going to be Maul Spike. Maul Spike, dealing damage with Maul from stealth, stuns the target for 2 seconds. Standard and weak enemies are knocked down. And the third option at level 20 would be Force Cloak. Increases movement speed by 50% while active and slows all enemies within 5 meters by 75% for 2.5 seconds when activated. So interesting. Yeah, it's a push, and the enemies get knocked down for 3 seconds too. So it's kind of interesting. Your push has always been kind of a default thing that you had, but now you have to choose it. The next, or you can choose, Maul from stealth will stun your target, or Force Cloak increases movement speed. So at 25, you'll get your Voltaic Slash, kind of like you did before. And then at level 30, you'll choose an ability that affects Voltaic Slash. So the first option is going to be Reckless Voltage. Dealing damage with Voltaic Slash reduces the cooldown of Recklessness by 2 seconds. The next option is called Voltaic Engine. Voltage stacks built by Voltaic Slash increases your critical hit chance by 10% per stack. And lastly, Voltaic Defense. Voltage stacks built by Voltaic Slash increase your damage reduction by 5% per stack. In addition, Voltaic Slash slows its target by 30% for 6 seconds. So you'll kind of notice a bit of a pattern going here. Some of these choices that you can make about your key abilities will make you more defensive, some of them will make you more attacky, and some of them will make you more stunny. So it's always something you can look into depending on what type of content you want to play. You'll be able to switch between those 3 options. At level 35, you get to make another choice. The first one is called Lightning Engine. Critically hitting with voltaic slash or a direct force attack generates 10 force and heals you by 1% of your max health. This effect cannot occur more than once per second. The second choice is lightning critical, and just as a heads up, don't put too much thought into any spelling mistakes or grammar errors or non-capitalization and stuff like this. Their goal was to get the proposed changes out as quickly as possible so you can test them and give feedback, and then all of this will be polished up at launch. So the second option is lightning critical. Force spending melee attacks now benefit from recklessness and consume its stacks. You deal additional elemental damage to targets you critically hit with melee attacks. This effect cannot happen more than once every 3 seconds. And the last option is Overcharged Saber. Oh, interesting. That's a choice now at level 35. Overcharges your lightsaber charge for 15 seconds, immediately restoring 15% of your max health. And there's a lot of other stuff related to that that's mostly the same as Overcharged from before. At level 40, you'll have Low Slash, and you'll just get that one. At level 50, you'll get another choice. And I believe these are utilities from before that you could choose, and now they're just part of the level 50 choice. So the first choice is Formless Phantom. As Darkness reduces all damage taken while stunned by 30%. As Deception and Hatred reduces the damage taken from area attacks by 30%. The other option is Fade, reduces the cooldown of Force Cloak by 30 seconds and extends its duration by 5. And lastly, Dark Stability. Activating Deflection grants 6 seconds of immunity to stun, sleep, lift, and incapacitating effects. Level 55, you'll just hop on that ball lightning train. At level 60, kind of an interesting choice to make. Kind of a weird one. So Force Phase will be your first choice, and it's a passive. And what it does is Force Speed and Phantom Strides grants Force Phase, removing all movement impairing effects and granting immunity to them for 2 seconds. So basically a movement-based choice. Second would be Speed Surge. Activating Shock, Ball Lightning, or Eradicate increases your movement speed by 50% for 9 seconds. So another movement-based choice. And lastly, this one's interesting. Increases the damage dealt by Lacerate by 25%. So apparently just throw in some damage in there. At level 70 is kind of going to be the big choice. And I will note that for the Sorcerer at level 70, you get the choice of 3 abilities, and they're the same depending on your discipline. Doesn't matter. On the Assassin, you'll get 1, 2, 3 on the Deception, 1, 2, 3 on the Hatred, and then on the Darkness, you do not have the same choices. Don't freak out quite as much if you're a tank. So hold on tight. Here are the choices as a Deception Assassin. So the first option is Severing Slash. And I believe that's the conal attack that got added fairly recently. So you've got the one attack where you spin your lightsaber around in a circle, hits everything nearby, and then Severing Slash was the conal. It wasn't super useful. It depended on the situation. It would do more damage depending on like how many enemies it would hit compared to your spin around attack. But it's now no longer something you just have. It's something that you would have to actively choose at level 70. The second level 70 choice is Whirlwind. Strangely enough, traps the target in a whirlwind for 8 seconds. Non-player, non-standard, non-weak targets heal rapidly while trapped. Damage causes this effect to end prematurely. So I guess if you want to do any whirlwinding, you have to choose that one. Interesting. And the last one is going to be Force Shroud at level 70. Force Shroud is a really crazy ability, and I'm not surprised to see this here. I think this is going to be the choice that players are going to be like, oh, I need my Force Shroud. Throw a tantrum. So Force Shroud is incredibly useful because it purges all hostile removable effects. So it's kind of like a cleanse. It's a defensive, and basically you don't get hit by anything. I'm trying to remember if this is the reflect. Sorry. So that's a bit of a choice there too. Yeah, very weird choice. So it's either get a super defensive ability, get Whirlwind, which is a crowd control, a kind of stun that breaks on damage, Or get Severing Slash, which is really focused for doing damage to multiple enemies who are near each other. Yeah, that's a crazy one. Oh, one of our players watching would like to point out that Force Shroud only works against force and tech attacks. It doesn't do anything against melee or ranged attacks. It's not much of a choice. You should just be taking Shroud. Yeah, it's kind of a weird one. So for level 70, for a lot of the classes, it felt like a really huge choice. Like, oh my god, I had to choose between one of 3 amazing abilities. I have a strong suspicion that players are just gonna choose Shroud. And a Whirlwind is a part of player versus player content, and that's gonna be a hard choice. It's not gonna be a hard choice. It's gonna suck to not have it. Mainly. I guess it depends how you like to play. If you're playing PvP, if you're playing operations, you're probably just gonna slap Shroud and call it a day. And so for our level 80 choice, it's gonna be, okay, here we go. This first one's one I know you guys like a lot. Reaper's Rush. Phantom Stride grants Reaper's Rush, allowing your next Assassinate to be used on any target. And if your enemy is killed within 10 seconds, Phantom Stride cooldown is reset. So you can jump around, basically. At level 80, the second choice is Avoidance. Reduces the cooldown of Jolt, which is your little stun if I remember right, by 2 seconds, and Unbreakable Will by 30 seconds, and Force Speed by 5 seconds. So that would be kind of like an old passive, or an old utility. And the last option is Shroud of Madness. Activating Force Cloak grants 2 seconds of Force Shroud. That's gonna be an interesting choice there. I'm kind of looking at our chat and seeing what you guys like. Some people are making fun of Deception right now in the current iteration of the game, so I guess we'll see how it goes. So let's jump into Hatred next. Give me 1 second. Okay, kids, let's go. Put on your Hatred pants. So, at level 1, you just get your, you don't get any new abilities. You just get your passive as a Hatred person. But at level 10, you'll pick up Death Field, and you'll pick up Recklessness, kind of like you had before. At level 15, though, you'll be able to make a choice about Death Field. So let's take a look at what that level 15 choice is. So the first option is Death Focus. Death Field restores 5 force for each enemy hit and reduces the cooldown of Recklessness by 5 seconds for each hit. Second option is going to be Penetrating Death. Death Field deals 10% more damage and increases your armor penetration by 10% for each target it hits for 10 seconds. And Deadly Field is the last option. Death Field gains an additional ability charge, allowing it to be used again before going on cooldown. Killing an enemy or activating Recklessness generates 1 charge. Oh, that one's kind of fun. So it's very interesting. These are all just kind of technically offensive abilities, but in 3 different ways. So at level 20, you have another choice to make. Kind of like we were showing before, you have to choose between your push, your overload, and the other 2 options are Maul Spike. So hitting something from stealth stuns a target. And the third option would be Force Magnetism. Force Cloak increases movement speed by 50% while active and slows all enemies within 5 meters for 75% for 2.5 seconds. And then at level 25, you'll get Eradicate, kind of like you had before. But at level 30, you'll get to make a choice about Eradicate. The first option is called Ruin. Whenever a target affected by your Eradicate dies, it bounces to the nearest target, instantly dealing its initial damage and priming the target for being eradicated, causing Eradicate to deal an additional 25% damage on initial hit. That's kind of interesting. So, on death, nearby enemy will take more damage. The second option is Eradication Ray. Eradicate now deals all its periodic damage over 1 second. So the periodic damage becomes, well, bam, damage right now. And 30, the last choice actually has the words in dev for in development. So this one's not quite ready yet. It says Befall. I think that theory is there, but they don't have it in practice in game. So if I went and tried to use it in game, it wouldn't work. It says dealing damage with Eradicate applies befall to the target, increasing the critical hit chance of your periodic effects by 10%. Lasts for 10 seconds. Right now, and it says in little brackets, applies buff to user for now. So it's not quite finished yet for testing. At level 35, you have another choice to make. The first option is Maliciousness. Killing an enemy and activating Recklessness resets the cooldown of all melee attacks, and Eradicate and increases their damage by 10% for 20 seconds. Stacks up. Hungering Force. The critical hit chance of your periodic effects is increased by 5%. Whenever you're healed by a Hatred class effect, you generate 1 force. And the last option is Overcharge Saber, which is going to be very similar to the ability you have now, isn't it? I think it used to be used as a defensive ability, but I think it's not in this specific case, or that's only for the tank. I've only ever played the tank, I'm sorry. Alright, at level 40, you're going to pick up your Creeping Terror. At level 50, you're going to have another utility choice to make, so you're going to make a very similar choice as you did over in Deception. So you're going to choose between damage reduction while stunned. Oh, sorry. You're going to reduce the damage taken from area attacks by 30%, or you're going to reduce the cooldown of Force Cloak and make it last longer, or you're going to activating Deflection grants 6 seconds of immunity to stun, sleep, lift, and incapacitating effects. So you're going to choose between those 3. At level 55, you're going to do Leeching Strike. You're just going to get it. And at level 60, this is very, very similar. At level 60, 70, and 80 are going to be almost exactly the same as Deception. So at level 60, as Hatred, you're going to choose between Force Phase, Speed Surge, and increasing the damage dealt by Lacerate by 25%. So movement, Lacerate, hitting harder. Level 70 is going to be that kind of hard choice between Severing Slash, that AoE conal. That level 70 choice. The second option is going to be Whirlwind, and the last option is going to be Force Shroud. So there's a good chance that most players are going to be picking Force Shroud as their option. I have a strong suspicion, but we'll see if anyone comes up with any fancy combinations or anything like that. At level 80, you'll be choosing Reaper's Rush, just like in Deception. Avoidance, for reducing the cooldown of Jolt and Unbreakable Will, and Force Speed. And Shroud of Madness, Force Cloak gives you 2 seconds of Force Shroud. So there you go. That's going to be Hatred. And the last one we're going to check out is Darkness. And very important to note that Darkness is going to be different as it is the tank spec. Something they did learn when they released the Jedi Knight was that you shouldn't treat tanks exactly the same, or tanks will riot if you try and treat the tanks like DPS. So I'm very glad to see that they didn't quite make the same mistake this time around. So at level 10, you'll be picking up Recklessness and Depredating Bolts. And at level 15, you'll be able to pick a new passive ability that affects your Depredating Bolts. So the first option is going to be increases the damage, crit hit chance, and threat generated by Depredating Bolts by 10%. Oh, that's kind of cool. The second is called Energized Bolts, and this one once again says in development. And that means it's not quite finished right now on the test server, but the theory is in place. Like, this is what they'd like to add. And it says Depredating Bolts deals 20% more damage to targets you have mind controlled, and restores 5 force whenever it deals damage to them. Damage bonus is not currently working, so it'll do more damage to mind controlled targets. And then last one is Depredating Bolts arcs to nearby targets each time it deals damage. So it's called Chained Bolts, so it turns it into kind of a multi-target attack. That's kind of interesting. Dark Ward at level 25, you'll just pick that up as always. At level 20, you've got an interesting choice. I accidentally skipped it. Spike is now something you have to actively choose at level 20. So before, you kind of just got it. It was just something you kind of got, and often you could treat it as an extra stun. And if you were playing as a tank, depending on what type of... Was it the set bonus or the tactical? One of those two could turn Spike, I believe it was the set bonus, into an extra defensive ability. Whether it will still be that, whether that set bonus will still apply at level 80, we don't know yet. But Spike is now something that you have to choose at level 20. And your other options are Energized Shock. Shock's critical hit damage is increased by 50%, and dealing damage with shock extends the duration of mind control by 3 seconds to targets already affected by your mind control. And the other option is Force Magnetism. Force Cloak increases movement speed by 50% while active and slows all enemies within 5 meters. I have a feeling if you're not quite sure which to take there... Shock can do 50% more damage. I don't know, it would be more useful to have Spike to have those stuns, or to as a tank, or Shock to do extra damage. This is not technically the tank's job to be doing damage in the first place, eh? Level 25, you get Dark Ward. At level 30, you get a choice to make about Dark Ward. And it's called, the first option is called Desk Ward. Each time you consume a charge of Dark Ward, the cooldown of Force Cloak is reduced by 2 seconds. If Dark Ward is broken by damage, it reduces the accuracy of all nearby enemies by 20% for 6 seconds. An interesting option there. Next up, it's going to be Twilight Ward. Each time you consume a charge of Dark Ward, the cooldown of Recklessness is decreased by 2 seconds. If Dark Ward is broken by damage, it grants 1 charge of Recklessness to you. And third option will be, each time you consume a charge of Dark Ward, the cooldown of Mass Mind Control is reduced by 2 seconds. If Dark Ward is broken by damage, it deals damage to nearby targets, generates a high amount of threat, and finishes the cooldown of Discharge and Wither. Those are some weird choices. I have no idea which one would be more useful there for a tank. We're definitely going to have to see on that one. At level 35, you've got another choice to make. The first one is called Dark Forces. Each time you deal damage to a target you have mind controlled, you restore 2 force and heal for 1% of your maximum health. So it's kind of a nice little boost there. Second option is Reckless Defense. Consuming a charge of Recklessness grants you and nearby allies Reckless Defense, increasing your damage reduction by 5% per stack. Reckless Defense stacks up to 3 times and lasts 6 seconds. And lastly is Overcharged Saber. Much like we saw in the other 2 disciplines, you can choose Overcharged Saber. Man, I'm actually really looking forward to trying out the Assassin, because I feel like the choices are a little less clear here, especially with the Dark Ward stuff going on. I'd love to go try those out. At level 40, you'll pick up Wither as always. At level 50, you'll be able to make those kind of utility choices. So, but it gets a little different, because in Darkness, in the tank spec, Formless Phantom changes. So at level 50, you can choose between Formless Phantom, which as Darkness reduces all damage taken while stunned by 30%. The second option is Fade, reduces the cooldown of Force Cloak by 30 seconds and extends its duration by 5 seconds. It would be very situational, because you can use Force Cloak for some crazy stuff. You don't really need it to last longer most of the time. And last one is Dark Stability. Activating Deflection grants 6 seconds of immunity to stun, sleep, lift, and incapacitating effects. So that's definitely going to be a particularly important choice for tanks, I think. Level 55, you get Force Pull. It's not a choice, you just get it. Level 60, you're going to choose between Force Phase, which Force Speed and Phantom Stride grants Force Phase, removing all movement impairing effects and granting immunity to them for 2 seconds. So especially as a tank, you need to move around more than almost any other class, I would think, or role. Second option is Speed Surge. Activating Shock, Ball Lightning, or Eradicate increases your movement speed by 50% for 9 seconds. Tanks can get around fast, is always nice. I don't know if that's going to be like a key choice or not, but I guess we'll see. And lastly, your option is to increase the damage dealt by Lacerate by 25%. I don't think that's going to be a key ability for tanks. Maybe we'll all be choosing Force Phase. I guess we'll see. And level 70, your level 70 choices are different than Deception and Hatred. The most important difference is that Force Shroud is not part of the equation there. Do I just have Force Shroud? I don't know how to properly check that. Okay, so it looks like it's a bit hard to tell, but as Darkness, it looks like I just have Force Shroud, one of my major defensive abilities. I don't have to choose it by any means, I just get it. However, my level 70 choice becomes a choice between having my Push, my Overload, Severing Slash, which is my conal attack, and lastly, my Whirlwind, which is my CC. So the level 70 choice is not very scary, I think. I mean, you're still gonna want to decide per fight, but it's not like, no, I'm missing my key tanking abilities, no. And at level 80, you will get to make your final choice, and that's going to be between Reaper's Rush, much like how we discussed before, Avoidance to reduce your Jolt, Unbreakable Will, and Force Speed cooldown, and lastly, your Shroud of Madness, activating Force Cloak grants 2 seconds of Force Shroud. So there you go. That was our trees that we saw on the public test server for the Assassin. We went over Deception, then Hatred, then the Darkness tank. And if you wanted to see what the Sorcerer looks like, I have that up on a different video where we go over the 2 damage specs and the healing spec for the Sith Inquisitor. If you wanted to test these out, all of these are available on the public test server, and especially if you play Darkness, Deception, or Hatred, I would love for you to test these out. You only need to be a subscriber and download the PTS, because then you can give your feedback on these changes, and more specifically, like, are any of these choices in any of the trees really horrible? Like, should Force Shroud be in the tree? What about Whirlwind? What about Severing Slash? Level 70 is probably the hardest one to swallow. Do any of the other smaller choices down the trees don't really make sense? Especially, I'm asking you guys who have played these to give feedback, because you're going to know way better than me, who has only ever played the Darkness tank. However, if you are not planning to test it but still want to give feedback, you can do that as well on the SWTOR PTS forums. Just make sure to note that you didn't actually test them yourself, but instead you're providing feedback based on what you saw online versus actually trying it out yourself. And if you are giving feedback, the feedback that they're particularly looking for, like what are the questions they're asking to keep in mind, is the example question is, does the current combat rotation make this experience feel like you're playing an assassin? Why or why not? And the second is, if you have feedback on the different disciplines, please note your feedback accordingly so we can track it. So if you're playing the Assassin, you're posting on the Assassin feedback thread, make sure to also tell them what your Darkness, Deception, or Hatred so they don't get confused. Another really useful thing that can help is say which type of content you tested it on. Like, did you go to Onderon or did you go try out a Flashpoint or something? Second, what type of content do you normally play in game? Because for example, one of our players who was watching as we recorded this live was pointing out when I was saying, oh, this ability is super useless, they pointed out, well, that's actually useful in PvP. So knowing what type of content you normally play on your Sith Assassin can help them understand your feedback a lot more as well. And lastly, let them know how the changes make you feel, especially for any of the choices that aggravated you or any of the choices that really interested you. Like, for example, I was very interested in the choices, the changes, or the additional abilities attached to Dark Ward. So I hope you guys enjoyed this super intensive overview of the potential proposed changes to the Sith Assassin for 7.0. As always, if you want to see more Star Wars The Old Republic videos, subscribe to this channel, and if you like these super ridiculously in-depth videos about the game that we love, please visit Swtorista.com/support and pledge to keep these videos happening. And see you guys later!